Unite, how you guys doing? Awesome. Well, hey, my name is Megan. If you guys don't know me, I'm not normally up here. I'm not Chris, obviously, but I'm really excited to come and talk to you guys tonight. I am the middle school director here. I don't know if you guys know that. We have an amazing middle school ministry here. Have you guys heard of it, Fuel? It's awesome. Hey, if you guys haven't heard of it, we literally have hundreds of middle school students who come through these doors every single week, and it's awesome. I also lead an awesome Unite small group, life group. Where are my life group ladies at? Woo! There's a couple of them here. I'm pretty pumped about that. It's a new group, and so if you're new to Unite and you need a group, I'd love to talk to you guys afterwards. And so I'm excited to be here to talk to you guys tonight because I think what I'm about to talk to you about is so important, specifically the most for your age group right now. And so from the 18 to 25, because I feel like if I would have heard this sermon when I was 18, I feel like I would have been changed more of my life than if I would have waited, which I kind of heard it later in life. And so I'm really excited here to talk to you. And so again, I'm the middle school director here, which many people hear that and they're like, that's kind of weird, right? Like, let's be honest, who actually wants to hang out with middle school students? I don't know why I like them. They're it's kind of crazy. It's a little ADHD around here on Monday nights, a little crazy. But I love this age. I love the age of middle school. And I was talking with somebody the other day, like, why do I like this age? And I started to think back, and I started thinking about my middle school years, and I realized I didn't really hate middle school. Like, I know most of you would say maybe that you didn't have a good middle school experience. I don't know. Do you guys have a good middle school experience? Anybody have a bad one? Yeah, bad. Okay, maybe some of you guys might have had a good one. Well, I didn't have that bad of one. I mean, I was weird. Don't get me wrong. Like, hands down, I was weird. But now that I'm working with middle school students, I realize that like 90% of middle schoolers are weird. So I don't think I was that abnormal as a middle schooler being weird. But I didn't mind it. But there was one thing I did not like about middle school, and that was gym class. And here's the reason is because we'd have this time where we play sports, and I'm just not that good at sports. Like, I know you guys can't tell because, like, look at this body. Like, I'm a sports-ready body, right? Okay. But seriously, I'm not good at sports. So much so, like, the other day, we're hanging out in the office, and some of the guys you guys might know, like Josh and Toby and Chris, are all hanging in the office, and all of a sudden, one of our pastors, Pastor Jack, if you guys come to Metro, you might know him. He comes in the office like, hey, guys, let's all take a break and go play lightning. And so we're like, okay. I'm like, oh gosh, okay, sure, I'll go. And so we go to the gym. We're at Riverview, so we go to the gym and we start playing. And it's like Josh, it's Chris, it's Toby, it's James, it's Eric, one of our video guys. It's just a bunch of guys. I was like, well, we're playing with Pastor Jack. I mean, I have to make it over him at least, you know. So the rule of the game is you have to throw it, and then you have to get it in the basket before the next person gets it in, or else you're out. And so I don't know if you guys have played that way, that kind of lightning, but that's what we're playing. And so here I am, and you would think that I could at least get one single basket. No, I was out every time. Chris is like, okay, first person out's gotta buy this. And I was like, I'm out. I'm not even playing that because I'm terrible. Like, I'm just terrible at sports. I've always been terrible at sports. And that was the way it was in middle school too. I just wasn't good. And so the reason I hated it is because I would normally then be picked last for middle school gym. And if you ever had that feeling of being picked last at gym class for a middle school, it's not a good feeling. And so I remember this one time we were playing kickball, and we come in there, I'm like, maybe today might be the day I get picked not last. I didn't even want to be picked first, like that's out of the question, but I was like, I'm not gonna be picked last. So there we go, into the middle school, I'm waiting, and all of a sudden there's this guy, and he has like a gimp leg, and I'm like, okay, I gotta be picked before this guy with the gimp leg. Like, there's no way they would pick him before me. So all of a sudden I'm waiting, and then all of a sudden they go, Jimmy, Susan, somebody else, I can't make up names, but I don't remember exactly what names of these kids, but all of a sudden, it's me and the kid with the bum leg. And I'm like, come on, please. And they picked the kid with the bum leg, and I was stuck being picked last. Like, I don't know if you guys can relate to that. If you're good at sports, like, You are awesome. That's not me. But I don't know if you can relate to that. Like, I feel like that has kind of followed me through my life, though, of being picked last. And this theme of being picked last seemed to have followed me to where when I was in high school, it just seemed like my friends only called me when they weren't busy. Anybody ever experience that? Like, you just feel like everybody else hang out, and your friend always calls you last. Like, after all their plans, they call their 12 friends, and then after all their friends, they're like, hey, you want to go to a movie? And you're like, I guess, like, okay. Or like too, like when I got older and I was like in the college age, I went to community college for a little bit, and I felt like that too. Even then, I was like, man, I feel like my friends always call me last, or when their plans fail, then I'm like their backup plan. Like, who wants to be a backup plan? And that was that feeling. Even after I met Jesus, I still kind of felt that way with God in some sense, where I just didn't feel like God wanted me. Like I wasn't wanted, I wasn't loved by God. And I don't know if you can relate. Maybe you can. And see, some of us have reasons why we believe this about God. Maybe it was in your life that there's a sin you just can't get away from. Maybe it's that you just don't feel good enough for God. Or maybe you were burned by a church member or a church, and you're like, if that's the way God is, God must treat me like that too. And we start to push away from God saying, well, God, you obviously didn't choose me because look at how this is happening in my life. Like, how could you ever want me? And I started treating God like that, where one day I was reading the Bible and this really stuck to me and started to change my perspective in this, where it's Ephesians 1. We're going to pick up in verse 4. It says this: even before he made the world, God loved us and chose us in Christ to be holy and without fault in his eyes. God decided in advance to adopt us into his own family by bringing us to himself through Jesus Christ. This is what he wanted to do, and it gave him great pleasure. See, look at this verse. God chose you. He chose you. And I started to read that, and I was like, man, but I don't feel good enough, God. But God was like, no, I chose you. And not only did he choose us, he adopted us into his family, and it was his pleasure to do so. He was happy about it. He was excited. It wasn't like he was like, okay, I'm going to pick you because you're the only one left. Like, no, God was excited. He chose you, and he was excited to choose you. And that, to me, just started to wreck me. And this changes everything, right? When we learn this truth, it changes everything. Just like Chris was talking about last week. I don't know if you were here last week. Chris brought an amazing message where he was talking like God doesn't choose perfect people. Like, that's what I thought at first. Like, I thought God chooses only perfect people, the Christians who sing in the band and all that stuff. No, God uses saved people. And when you're saved, meaning you have a relationship with Jesus, that means you're forgiven. That means you're set apart, you're called to do something. But if you're in here tonight, I want to dig a little deeper into that because I don't think you're just called to anything. I think you are called and chosen for a purpose that God has for you. God has a specific purpose for you. And so if you're in this room tonight, I don't think it's by accident. I think there's a reason God has you in here because God has a purpose for you and a calling for you that he wants you to go and start moving in. And that's why my big idea for tonight that I want you guys to get is this, is that when you know you are chosen, it puts you into motion. When you know you're chosen, it puts you into motion. Meaning, when you know that God has called you and chosen you for a specific person, it starts to move you and starts to put you into what God has for you. You can't stay still anymore. You have to go. And that's my big thing. And so this principle is seen over and over and over again in the scriptures. There's people, we're talking about the Anyone series. So what we're doing is we're following people from the Bible that were like anyones. I actually think it should be called like the Nobody series because a lot of these people were like nobodies. They were like the underdog, the nothings in their life. But they became a someone. For instance, this guy named David. Anybody ever heard of David, King David? He was chosen, but he was like the last place. He was picked last, to be honest. If you go and you read the story, reread the story of David, but I'm telling you, he was picked last, but he was chosen. And guess what? It put him into motion. Or if you see that after he was saying, hey, you're going to be king one day, a little bit later, he goes and kills Goliath, the giant. Like, I don't know if you know that story. It was giant. He kills him with a rock and a sling. It's kind of crazy. But because he was chosen, he knew it. It set him into motion. We have a guy like Moses. Chris calls him Big Mo, right? And so Moses, again, was chosen to set the Israelites free. He was chosen. And guess what? That set him into motion where then he started to go to Pharaoh and was like, hey, you better let the people free or else there's going to be these plagues and all that stuff. And we know the story, like he was chosen and it set him into motion to doing those things. And we have a guy named Paul that Chris talked about last week, where again, he was chosen to preach to the Gentiles, meaning the people that didn't believe in God. And that set him into motion where I believe that some of us, maybe all of us in this room, the reason we're in here is because of the impact that Paul made way back when. It set him into motion. He was chosen to set him into motion. And so tonight I want to talk about another person that I believe is the same, that this person knew they were chosen and it set them into motion. And so we're gonna read the story of Esther. And so if you guys haven't heard of Esther, it's an amazing book in the Bible. It's about a girl. And so here's the thing. I know right now you guys are like, okay, the girl's coming to preach about girls. Like, what the heck? Okay, but first of all, I have to say is that Chris preaches about guys every week, and we never hear about the girls. And so I want to just represent the ladies tonight because there are incredible, yeah, ladies, I love you guys. There are incredible women in the Bible. And I believe that we can learn truths in that. And I'm not talking just for the girls. So if you're a guy in this room, do not tune me out. I'm not just talking to the girls right now. I'm talking to the guys too. Because I think Esther has some important things that you guys, as guys, need to know too, because it relates to both. And so we're going to dig into Esther tonight. And so a little bit about Esther. I don't know if you know the history of Esther or anything like that, but Esther, if you read about her, she was a Jew. And at the time that she was a Jew, she was like a minority in her area. So she was a Jew, she was a minority, and she was an orphan. So her mom and dad had passed away, and she was living with her cousin, Mordecai. So here we have this girl that was an anybody in some sense. Again, I think it's like a nobody. She was the underdog. She was like the person that you would last think would be anybody or would be a somebody one day, right? And here's what happened. Eventually, spoiler alert, she becomes queen and she saves the Jewish people. So she becomes queen one day. And you're like, what the heck? How does that happen? And the reason I love this story is because I think we can relate to the story. Like, I think if Esther was around today, she would be from downriver. Because, let's just be honest, downriver, where our mountains are made of trash and the air smells like factory. I mean, on a hot day around here, I can smell something that doesn't smell very good. You know what I'm talking about. Like, we love the underdog story because we're like, hey, if somebody like Esther can make it, we can too. And I believe that's true. I think every single person in this room could be a somebody just like Esther. And so I think she has a couple principles that are really important for us to learn if we want to be a someone one day. If you're like, man, I want to be that someone. I want to be somebody that God uses. I think you have to look at a couple things that Esther understood. And so I think the first thing about Esther that you're going to see is that she was different. And so if we want to be a somebody, we need to be different. And we kind of get that, right? Like, we get it, okay, somebody, you got to be different. Like, if you want to be the best Olympic athlete, you can't just sit on the couch all day and watch TV. Like, we get that. You got to be different. Like, they eat different, they train different, they do crazy stuff because they want to be athletes, right? And we get that. And Esther was no different. And I kind of started to understand this a little bit, this idea of different. A few months back when I started, I decided I was going to go on to a low-carb diet. And so if you guys are not sure where the low-carb diet is, it's kind of terrible, but it's okay. It's where you don't eat bread, you don't eat sugar, and all the things that have carbs in it. So you guys probably know all that stuff. And so I'm like in the Generation team, and I don't eat carbs now. I'm like, okay, guys, I'm doing this low-carb diet, and everyone's like, okay. But it becomes really hard because I'm different than all of them. And so this kind of came true the other day when we were at Taco Bell. So one day we were having our generation meeting. Afterwards, we go and we get lunch. And so the guys are like, okay, we're going to go to Taco Bell. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll find something. So I go to Taco Bell, and I'm trying to order something. And again, I can't have all this stuff. I'm like, okay, I could order a salad, but it would be like $10 for like a salad. And I was like, that's so silly because I got to get it without all this stuff. What the heck? So I'm trying to figure out ways and like Googling like what to get at like low carb at Taco Bell. And I'm sitting there, like Josh is like, oh my goodness, Josh is sitting there like taking pictures, like memeing me, like, all like, hey, when Megan finally figures out what she's gonna order. So I'm sitting there, figure out what I'm gonna order, and the guy is like really confused because they just don't get it, and the guy was ordering things. So literally it was like 15 minutes to order Taco Bell, which is kind of a lot, again. But I get it, I order, and then I go back, and we're like eating it, and I'm like, man, I'm real different right now. Everyone else, like Chris, he brought his lunch from home, and so he had like leftover pizza and cookies and all this stuff, and I'm like, Chris, you suck, like seriously. I'm like, I look at a cookie and I gain like 5 pounds, what the heck? And so Josh is like eating whatever, and Toby, he's like eating his big, huge meal, and I'm like, you guys, it's not good. Sometimes it's hard to be different in that situation, but in order to be somebody different, I need to be different. And so that's the same with Esther. Esther was different. And so to jump into her story, I want to recap a little bit. So in case you don't know Esther, you don't know her story. So here's what's happening. There's a guy, a king named King Xerxes. And he was king, and he pretty much threw a big, huge party one day over his kingdom to kind of like show everybody how wealthy he was. So he did that. It was like a really long, several-day thing, and they gave everyone unlimited wine. And so he started to get drunk, obviously. You have unlimited wine, you're probably going to get drunk. And so all of a sudden he's like, hey, I really want my Queen Vashti to come here. And so they call for her, and she's like, like, I ain't gonna go to my man all drunk like that. No, thank you. Pretty much, she like disses him and says, no, I'm not gonna go see you. And that was not good. When the king calls for you, he's a king, you go. She didn't really get that, so what they did is they decided they're gonna banish her, get rid of her, and they're gonna find a new queen. And so they go and go out to all the area and try to find people, and this is where we're gonna pick up the story to figure out Esther. And so this is Esther 2, verse 8. As a result of the king's decree, Esther, along with many other young women, was brought to the king's harem at the fortress of Susa and placed in the Haggai's care. Haggai was very impressed with Esther and treated her kindly. He quickly ordered a special menu for her and provided her with beauty treatments. He also assigned her 7 maids especially chosen from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maids to the best place in the harem. And so what I want you to get about this is that there was something different about Esther. They treated her kindly. She had influence on those people, and the reason why is because she was different. If she was like everyone else, she wouldn't have had the impact on everyone that she did. But she was different, and therefore everybody treated her differently. And here's the thing about us, isn't that the same thing? We should be different in our world, in the place that we are, in our workplace, maybe at your school. Should be different. And that's what Esther was. She was different to the point that she had influence on people because she was different. And the reason why she was different is because she was a Jew. She loved God. The love of God was in her, and so that permeated through everything she had, and she was different because of it. And that should be the same for us, where if you guys read this in Romans 12:2, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of the world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. It says, don't copy the rest of the world. Be different. And the difference should be because of the love of Jesus. What if the love that Jesus, that you once you accept Jesus, you have, starts to change everything about you? What if the way you talk changed because of the way that you love Jesus? No longer are you putting people down, but you're starting to encourage them. What if the way you had your friendships started to change because of the love of Jesus in you? What if the way that you were at school, the way, if you're still living at home, if you're at home, yeah, guess what? The love of Jesus should change you, that you should even respect your parents even though you're over 18. I get it, it's hard. But the love of Jesus changes us, and it moves in every area of our life, and that was the true for Esther. Esther had influence because she had the love of Jesus that was permeating everything through her, and I believe that could be the same for you. She didn't just be different when she became queen, though. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like, she was different from the moment that she was back in, and she was the orphan girl that no one knew about. She was different then. And so if you guys, to fast forward the story, is that she was so different that guess what? King Xerxes, he chose her as queen because he noticed it. He noticed the difference too. And so he's like, yeah, I want her as queen. There's something about her. When was the last time that somebody said about you, there's something about you that's different? That's the way we should be. Don't copy the behaviors of the world. We should be different in the way we act, the way we love, the way we talk, the way we have friendships should be different. And look, I think that leads us into the second thing that you need to know about her is that she was different, but she also wasn't afraid to do hard things. She did hard things, and that's the same thing with us. We need to do hard things. And so if I want to recap the story a little bit, so she's chosen queen. Everything is rainbows and butterflies for a few minutes, but then plot twist. This guy named Haman starts to rise to power. And Haman is the bad guy of the story. As you read, again, if you want to read I would encourage you to go to Esther and read her story. But Haman was the bad guy. And so all of a sudden he starts to rise to power, and he wants everybody to bow to him. But Mordecai, who is Esther's cousin, refuses because he is also Jew, and he only bows to God. And he was like, hey, I'm not going to bow to you. I'm only going to bow to God. Well, that made Haman angry. And so instead of killing Mordecai, he goes to the extreme. He's like, I'm going to kill all the Jews, which is kind of crazy to me in the story that he's like, hey, well, I'm just going to kill them all. What? But that's the story. That's where we're at. And so he goes to the king. Again, he's rise to power, so he's an important person in the king's life. And he goes to the king, and he's like, hey, I'm going to give you money if you can let me kill all the Jews. And he's like, okay, you can do it. Now pause, give the king a little bit. He didn't realize at that point that his queen, Queen Esther, was a Jew. She never told him, they hid it from him, so he had no idea that Esther was a Jew. So he just thought, okay, whatever, he can do what he wants, I don't really care, kind of thing. And so they go and they do it, and then this is where we're gonna pick up the story. Esther, what's happening right now is Esther sees that Mordecai is in mourning. So the decree went out, and all the Jews heard it, and Mordecai now is mourning for what's about to happen to the Jews. He realizes that the Jews are about to be murdered, and he's very upset. And so he's sitting at the gate in mourning clothes. Now he couldn't go in past the gate, so he's just sitting outside there, and Esther notices it and sends her servant, Hathach, to visit him. And so this is where we pick up. So Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther and to explain to her. And he told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence and beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hathach went back to and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and all the people of the royal providences know that any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law. They will be put to death unless the king extends a golden scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I've been called to go to the king. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink night or day, for 3 days. And I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king. And even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So here we have Esther. She's facing a huge choice. Right now she has the choice of either going to the king and possibly dying, which again was against the law to go to the king. So the king should just be like, hey, sorry, you broke the law, you're gonna die. Or she could just not. She could have said, okay, I'm just gonna sit, I'm gonna wait till the king summons me, I'm gonna live my comfy life, I wanna have kids one day, can't I just wait till he summons me? It might be tomorrow, it might be the next day, it might be the next day after that, I'll just wait. She could have done that, but she didn't. She chose to do the hard thing, which was to go to the king. And we have choices like that in our life, right? Maybe they're not as hard as hey, face the comfy life or death, although that's the reality for a lot of Christians and the rest of the world. But we have choices that we can make in our life. Are you gonna do the hard thing or the easy thing? Choices like, hey, do I watch TV or do I read my Bible? Choices like, do I get this job that I might be around maybe doing things that I don't think pleases Jesus? Or do I take this less paying job that I know is gonna keep me in an environment that's better? Do I maybe make more money and save for this better car or this thing? Or do I go and use my money for a mission trip? Do I maybe go to regular college? Or do I maybe go and do an internship or a ministry school so I can go into ministry? Do I feel want to be the weird Christian in my life? Or do I just blend in with the crowd? Right? We have choices every day. Are you gonna do the easy thing or the hard thing? And look, the list can go on and on and on and on. Somewhere in the Christian American faith, we got the idea that Christianity is easy. And I don't know where this came from, and I bought that lie for a really long time, that Christianity, once we believe in Jesus, that means everything's butterflies and rainbows and everything's perfect. That's not true. That's not real. See, look, Jesus said, pick up your cross and carry it. When did carrying a cross be easy? That meant death in your life. That's the hard path that Jesus says we need to take. So my question for you, are you doing the hard things? What are you doing when no one's watching? I know for me, I'm talking to myself here, to be honest. Sometimes I want to live this Christian easy life rather than living the life that I know that Jesus has called me to. And the real life that he called you to is to do the hard things, not the easy ones. And guess what? That means Esther, she didn't wait to do the hard thing. She didn't say, hey, I'm gonna pray about it until the king summons me. Some of us say, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, maybe I'll pray about it, and we pray for 3 years and never do anything. I've heard that over and over again. Or, okay, I'm gonna pray, but look, Esther did pray. She did. She prayed for 3 days, prayed and fasted. But she didn't wait until something else happened. She didn't wait till the king summoned her. She didn't wait, and that comes to my third point. Don't wait. And this is where I pick up Esther 5, 1-3. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on the royal throne in the hall facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached him and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given to you. And so, as we recap the story, the end, she got deliverance for the Jews. She revealed to the king who she was, and then the king ended up seeing Haman for who he really was and ended up murdering him. and said, hey, you're Dawn. You were trying to kill my wife. What the heck? Esther didn't wait. Esther didn't wait until she was ready more. She didn't wait until she had everything she wanted. She didn't wait for her next step in life. She prayed, she fasted, and she went. And some of us, I think, in here are waiting in our life. Maybe you're like, okay, God, when you give me this certain job, I'll start to follow you. Okay, God, when you give me this, great job with a nice salary, then I'll start to do your calling for me. Okay, God, when I have more time in life, when I have the right guy, when I have the right girl, when I have a family, when I have 3 kids and a dog and a white picket fence, then I'll do what you call me to. But look, God is saying to you right now, don't wait. Don't wait, because we're going to be waiting forever if we wait. And here's the thing. There's always going to be something you want to wait for next. God is saying, don't wait, do it now. And this is what I want you guys to get. Is that Mordecai said this to Esther, and I think it's so impactful at this point, because you're going to see what's going to happen is this. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your family, father's family, will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Look, God is an unstoppable God with an unstoppable plan. He will carry out his plans with or without you, but he wants to use you, so don't wait. What if you were placed in a season of your life for such a time as this? What if you were placed in your college, in your school for such a time as this? What if you were placed in your family that you can't even stand sometimes for such a time as this? What if God placed that desire and that burden in your heart for such a time as this? What if he gave you that job for such a time as this? What if he is calling you to say, stop waiting and start moving towards the things he's called you to? Stop waiting, because you are there for such a time as this. And look, guys, it started to wreck me when I started hearing about this story of these kids. These kids that lived here in America, I think in the South, these young kids, 6, 7, 8 years old, heard a story about these other kids in Uganda who were living in an orphanage that was pretty much a prison camp. They were chained. They had limited access to bathrooms, so they were pretty much in filth and feces and all that kind of stuff. They had no beds. If they did have a bed, they were sleeping 3 to a bed. And this was happening. And so these kids found out about that and said, hey, what can we do? We obviously can't go, but what can we do now? They didn't want to wait until they were older. They wanted to do something now, and so they started this thing called Cupcake Kids, where they took the little talents that they had, made cupcakes, and sold them to neighborhood people. And guess what? They started to raise money, and that money went over to people, and it started to transform that into a real orphanage that had, kids that are taken care of, that people that love them, they would hire people to love them, who would take care of them and clean them. They cleaned up the whole area. They literally changed those kids' lives by selling cupcakes, but they did not wait. They were 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. Look, I don't want to get to the end of my life and be 60 years old and see what I could have done when I was 20, when I was 30, when I was 40, and saying, why did I wait? Why did I wait? Why didn't I see that I was called for this time? You are called for such a time as this. Don't wait. I'm sick of waiting. And for me, the reason why this is such a burden in my heart, this message, is because it started to rattle me. Where, for me, I have a heart for people, for kids who don't have families. I have a heart for orphans. I can remember, as long as I can remember, saying, I want to adopt. Where did that come from? I knew no one who was adopted. That was the burden God placed in me. And I was like, man, I feel like I'm supposed to be a mom, but I'm not married, so I guess I'll just wait. And I waited, and I waited, and I waited. But then God started to speak, don't wait. There are kids that don't have families, don't wait. So me, right now, what does that mean? I'm in the process of starting to be a foster parent because I'm tired of waiting, and I don't want to see kids who are broken and messed up because they don't have parents that love them. Stop waiting. What is it for you? What is it for you in this room? What are you waiting to do? What are you waiting to do? Stop waiting. You were called, you were put in this room, in this place, in your season of life, in your school, in your work, in your family for such a time as this. Stop waiting. Go after it. You were chosen. It's going to put you into motion. Let it put you into motion. Let's pray. God, I just pray tonight, as we have so many people in this room right now, I pray you would start to rattle in their hearts, start to think about their lives. Why were they placed in this part of their life? Why were they placed in this family? Why were they placed with this burden on their heart, God? And I pray that you would start raising them up to stop waiting. God, I believe that in this room there are a bunch of somebodies. There are a bunch of people that are going to be pastors one day, missionaries one day, awesome moms, awesome dads, awesome business people. God, I pray that right now you would start to speak in their hearts, their next step. God, let us not wait, but let us start in motion for what you have called, God. Let us be different. Let us do the hard things that are going to make us to the place that you want us to go. God, and let us not wait. We love you. Thank you. In Jesus' name I pray.